Miss Beffa here with another installment on objective summaries. I wanted to show you another cheat sheet that you can use for objective summaries. And if you look at this one, it divides up and gives you examples of what could be part of your IVF topic sentence. So it shows you an example here of an identify, an okay, a better, and a best way to identify your text. And then this middle column I find particularly useful because it gives you an example of the kind of verbs that you could put for the V. You would decide what you think the text is doing and then pick a verb that goes along with that. It could help you keep from using the same one over and over again. Like I have a tendency to use describes, so this kind of helps me to pick a different verb. And then it shows you like what goes in the finish your thought part of the IVF. Down here at the bottom, it tells you to put those together to make your topic sentence and then create your fact outline, and then how to put it all together to make your objective summary paragraph. So there's another tool that you can use, and I want to give you another example of using this format to create an objective summary. And the text we're going to use for that example is called The Tyrant Who Became a Just Ruler by Maud Barrows Dutton, that was written in 1908. In olden times there lived a king who was so cruel and unjust towards his subjects that he was always called the tyrant. So heartless was he that his people used to pray night and day that they might have a new king. One day, much to their surprise, he called his people together and said to them, "My dear subjects, the days of my tyranny are over. Henceforth you shall live in peace and happiness, for I have decided to try to rule henceforth justly and well." The king kept his word so well that soon he was known throughout the land as the just king. By and by, one of his favorites came to him and said, "Your Majesty, I beg of you to tell me how it was that you had this change of heart towards your people." And the king replied, "As I was galloping through my forests one afternoon, I caught sight of a hound chasing a fox. The fox escaped into his hole, but not until he had been bitten by the dog so badly that he would be lame for life. The hound returned home, met a man who threw a stone at him, which broke his leg. The man had not gone far when a horse kicked him and broke his leg, and the horse, starting to run, fell into a hole and broke his leg. Here I came to my senses and resolved to change my rule. For surely, I said to myself, he who doeth evil will sooner or later be overtaken by evil. Okay, so there's our story. Now let's look at how we would use our graphic organizer to write an objective summary of this story. Your previous example was a nonfiction article that had subheadings. This is fiction and does not have any subheadings, and you may be asked to write an objective summary over fiction. So let's look at this one. First, we would do our identify, which would be identify the title and the author. So here's our title, The Tyrant Who Became a Just Ruler by Maud Barrows Dutton. So there's our identify. And then I used, whoops, not what I meant to do there. And then I used the cheat sheet to pick a verb instead of describes, which is what I tend to use. And so I picked depicts, which means close to the same thing, but for the sake of not overusing the same one, I picked depicts. Then what does it depict? Well, that's your finish your thought. It depicts the story of a king who was once a harsh ruler. However, after having a revelation, he learned to become a just ruler. So if we look at the story, this first paragraph here is basically talking about how he used to be cruel and unjust. So that is basically the main point of this. Then the next big important thing that happens is he calls together his people. He has this gathering where he makes his announcement that he's no longer going to be that way. Then when he keeps his word, his friend questions him and asks him, "How did you come about this change?" And so finally, the king reveals his story that led to his revelation. So the story about the fox and the hound and the horse and the man and how they all basically ended up with a broken leg, and how that led to him realizing that evil will overtake evil. So those are our main points, or the main events that happen in the story. Now we need to put it together. So we put our IVF together to make a sentence, and we have The Tyrant Who Became a Just Ruler by Maud Barrows depicts the story of a king who was once a harsh ruler, but after having a revelation, he learned to become a just ruler. There's our IVF. Topic sentence always goes at the beginning of the summary. And then we have our body here that we planned out in our outline. And our first sentence is going to be about the cruel and unjust king. And we're going to use transitions to make sure that our summary flows nicely. So we have a transition here in the beginning, and then we talk about the first main point or the first main event. The king is a cruel and unjust ruler. That brings us to our second point. And so we're going to use another transition. Next, he gathers his people to announce that he will no longer be a tyrant. Then we have our third main point. When the king actually keeps his word, that's another transition there. His friend questions him about how he was able to change. Then our last main point or our last main event, here's our transition. Finally, the king describes the story that led to his revelation that evil will likely be overtaken by evil. So again, you're not going to have any conclusion. You're just going to state the main events. And there you have a good example of a fiction story that you've written an objective summary over. So there you go. Hope that helps. See you later.